Nicholas, welcome to the Studiolo.
Thank you, Paola, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come on board. And now I'm going to be hooked, and I'm going to be at every single event, learning much more about all different fields, including the cuisine you mentioned. So, thank you for inviting me, and I'm thrilled that you're interested in what I'm up to. And I'm also really happy to be the first art dealer that you've had so far. So, thank you.
Nick, not everyone here in Studiolo actually uses Instagram, but if they are Instagram users, they probably know you already because you have these magnificent, upbeat, art-related posts every day. So maybe before we start talking about the topic of our conversation today, which is the art of spotting a sleeper,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, first of all, how did you actually embark on this field, this really exciting field of dealing in art?
It's a long, circuitous route. I've always been into art and antiques from a young age, dealing, and I had a stall on Portobello Market, and I bought and sold furniture and paintings, alongside having a career in fashion, which took me in the direction of working at Vogue and Harper's Bazaar for a long time. But whilst I was doing that, every single shoot I did was like a portrait in a way. So it was fashion orientated shoots with women wearing ruffs, shot in castles, men wearing military coats. It was always the fashion that inspired me, and I always loved portraits. Um, and then I started buying portraits, spotting portraits overseas, lots of different countries, and then selling them through the major auction houses in London, Sotheby's, Christie's. And then the Instagram started, as you touched on, and I just thought, why am I not doing this myself? Do I need to discover something, pass it on to someone else? Can I not be the face of it, photograph it, enthuse people, and sell it directly and reach people all over the world through the power of, what was emerging in terms of social media? So, yeah. And then it took over, fashion ended, and art began, and that's it. And the people in both tribes are completely different. There is some overlap, but I'm so, so happy to be doing what I'm doing now.
Yes,
Yeah.
incredible. So how is it to be an art dealer today? How do you think your field is different today than maybe it was before the social media took over our world?
I think that in a sense, it's an equal playing field, which is great. It means that young people can be enthused about old masters. They can be presented in a different way, but equally, the important things are the research, the authorship, and all those things need to come hand in hand with it. So it provides opportunities, but certainly in terms of having a business and selling, you've got to back that up with everything else. There's a lot happening. I think it's an exciting time, isn't it? I think that auction houses are having to respond to social media. They're on it themselves, obviously, with their Instagram accounts. They're having to create reels. They're having to present static art in a different way. It's an exciting moment for everybody. Everything's becoming mixed up. And, out of that, lots of interesting things are created, different platforms, different ways of seeing things, really, I think.
Yeah, yes, yes. Nick, our topic today is a very interesting one. When we first started talking about an interview, you mentioned talking about sleepers, and I thought, wow, what in gosh, what are sleepers? So can you tell us a little bit about what are these sleeping works of art?
Yeah, I don't know who coined the phrase, but a sleeper is, put simply, at its most simple, is a work that's authenticity, not its authorship has been lost over time. It's become lost. So basically, it's put up for sale. It's been hidden away somewhere potentially, but the artist has been lost. The sitter has been lost. And that provides an opportunity for people like me. And there's a whole industry around this with many people in the background, probably not upfront explaining how they do it. Yeah, so that provides an opportunity. These sleeping portraits provide an opportunity. And for me, what I love, obviously, the selling is important, but each sleeping portrait or painting opens up a window and a portal into a different moment in history and into a different character. So for me, I'm learning every single day, and it's keeping me really motivated. And yeah, that's the fun aspect. So sleepers are bringing me awake. Their sleepers are giving me life in a sense. So yeah, it's good.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And then you never really know what the next day will bring, right? What sleeper will all of a sudden wake up and you get to interact with it and maybe give it a name and, tell us the story.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating as well is these portraits, particularly, which is what I specialize in. These people do live on. So when they were painted obviously for posterity, um, but they have a life. Like I see portraits that I've bought that travel. There's one particular portrait I purchased that had a long history. It was at Chequers Court, the home of the British Prime Minister. Then the family took it to a flat in the Barbican. Then the nanny put it up for auction. In an auction house, the family spotted it, took it back. The family member came from the south of France, sold it to me. I sold it to a lady in one of the most famous houses I can't mention, upstate New York, Connecticut. She had it on display in this Gilded Age mansion. Her circumstances changed. The portrait I spotted again. Then I bought the portrait back. I then sold the portrait again. The portrait has just arrived in Malta for a young collector. And these people live on and they live on, they're traveling more than I'm traveling, which is what, I mean, antiques we know are green, but they are traveling a lot. Portraits are traveling more than I'm traveling this year. And certainly during lockdown, they were traveling a lot more.
Wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
So, what does searching for a sleeper actually entail?
There's no, well, I wish there was a formula. I think it's a lifestyle. And when you have a job that you love so much, it doesn't feel like work, but literally it's every waking moment. So it has to be a lifestyle. I spend countless hours on the internet searching multiple auction sites at the same time, bookmarking things, doing research, going off. Yeah, so a day is filled with that, despite the other things, cataloging stuff, photographing stuff. With new media, you have to do everything else. But the searching for sleepers it's just something that's in your blood and you have to be, it's not like you have to commit yourself to it, it just is your life, it's your passion. I don't drink, I don't smoke. It's what gives me the adrenaline, it's what gives me the charge to get up and get on with things, I think. It's a way of life.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a way of life, certainly.
I guess the unpredictability of it, right? What is there, what is next to be discovered? I think this is actually quite fascinating. And I think also, when you think about art collectors, they can never really stop collecting, right? It's always searching for the new treasure that you must have on your walls. And can I just tell you a little Renaissance story? Lorenzo the Magnificent, the wonderful humanist ruler of Florence. For many, many years, we know that he kept these three paintings in his bedroom, and they were by Paolo Uccello.
Yeah.
Napoleon then came to Italy in 1800s, and he basically took the two paintings out. So one is now in the Uffizi, the Battle of San Romano, and then the other two that are kind of part of this story, the trilogy. One ended up in London, one ended up in Paris. They will probably never be seen again, together in the same room. But Lorenzo had them in his bedroom, and only recently, maybe a year ago or so, I discovered that actually Lorenzo took them from Bartolini Salimbeni family. He literally came to his friend Bartolini Salimbeni. He said, "Hey, do you mind if I take Paolo Cello's paintings just for a while?" I don't know how he asked him, but the point is he never gave them back.
Right.
He just loved having them around. He actually had them in his bedroom, so he would wake up with these beautiful masterpieces. And that kind of made me think about collecting art and how you can't really stop. Almost like a little bit of a drug, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, it's a drug, but for lots of people, it becomes a space issue. Elizabeth will know about that, and lots of people that collect know about that. It's finding the wall space. I have one client who I've infused so much, who's bought so many paintings, but I knew it would come to an end because every wall was covered. And I was like, I need to devise a new way of clients hanging paintings from the ceiling or something. But, it brings us back to miniatures for collectors, for enthusiasts. Miniatures are such a good genre because of their size, and you can collect over different time periods. So that's why I'm encouraging people to get into miniatures because they take up less space. And literally, I've started. I'm not an expert by any means, but it's something that I'm really enthused about, getting a whole new generation of collectors involved in. And I'll be talking more about that perhaps a bit later. But yeah, so miniatures are a good way of fulfilling that need to collect, but also, you know, within the boundaries of a modern world where we don't have so much space to have so many paintings around us. If only we all lived in a flat so where we could hang everything up, that would be great. But it's not if you're in a studio flat in London or in Yorkshire even, you know, miniatures are, I think, the way forward.
So yeah, you have a new your sleeper is basically opening a whole new world, it seems. As far
Yes.
as collectors go. But when you search for a sleeper, what do you actually search for? Like, do you have any things that are kind of a checklist that you have to check through, or how does that work?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, this is going to sound counterintuitive and a bit strange, but actually, the way it starts with me is it always starts with recognizing quality. So, how it should potentially start and how it might start for some people is with the academic research and, having the time before something comes to market to look into it properly, and confirm authorship before purchase. Ideally, yeah, that would be great. But often in the modern world, we don't have this time. So what I'm looking for are real signs of quality. I'm looking for bravura brushstrokes. I'm looking for the highlight on a nose. I'm having seen thousands of portraits specifically and also paintings. I'm looking for something visually arresting that seems natural, that you can see the hand of the artist 200-300 years later. And often it's the case where I will buy something purely on a hunch because I know it's undervalued in terms of its quality. I will buy it, and then the search will start. A case in point is this portrait that I bought recently in Scandinavia. Um, Actually, shall I fetch? I might actually get it and show it to you.
Of course, we're used to have this art on the screen as images, but now we actually get to see the real thing. So why not?
Can't actually see me. So what I might do is just switch the view so I can see. I'm going to switch the view so I can see what I look like on the screen. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to. There we go. Look, that's better. So I spotted this in Scandinavia and I purchased it. And my feeling was that it was by a Russian artist. And the great thing about the autistic community is we all support each other. So my hunt was confirmed by Professor Blakesley at Cambridge University, who said she also thought it was Russian. I'll bring it closer to the screen. And she suggested the work of Dmitry Levitsky. And I'm liaising at the moment with Elena Stolkova in St. Petersburg, despite the events in Russia. And the latest actually email I received today is she wants me to x-ray it. I don't have an x-ray machine, unfortunately. Perhaps the local hospital might be able to help. I doubt it, because she wants to compare it to works of Levitsky. And so it's the era of Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great set up a school in St. Petersburg, and this is potentially one of the pupils. So I spotted the quality. The way that childhood is represented here in that face is just fantastic. So this is opening a whole world in 18th century pre-revolutionary Russia.
And when you said in Scandinavia, did you actually go, or did you see this online and then you were able to get it?
I'm back with you. Sorry, I'm darting around. Online, I saw it online and fell in love. So that's it. So purchased. Yeah. I'm going to change the display so I can just see, I'm just seeing everybody's face. Hi, folks. Let me switch back.
Yeah, look, there a lovely question coming in from Zachary. What were some of the visual indications that the painting was of Russian origin?
The face shape, the eyes specifically, which pointed towards that area. I know we don't like to be so sort of specific necessarily, but yeah, the shape of the face and certainly the eye area. The clothes would indicate English, potentially, because I've seen lots of portraits like that, Zachary, but actually, I knew something was off in that respect, and the sitter didn't look English. So that's what started the search.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Nick, are you ever wrong? When you, of course, after seeing thousands of these works of art, you do have that, instinct that is always there. But Does it ever happen to you that you're actually mistaken? And how many of the fakes do you encounter maybe on your research?
I haven't actually come across any fakes, but that's something that I sort of take for granted. And actually, I had an inquiry from a gentleman recently who bought a portrait, a quality portrait, but his main concern was, and it was quite valuable, his main concern was, is it real? Is it an antique portrait? And I said, well, it is. It is. I sell period portraits. They're all authenticated, but you can't take it for granted, I suppose, in the modern world. So they're out there. Actually, the partner of a very good friend called me, and they've since broken up. And he said to me, I have a Picasso in the chalet in Switzerland. Don't tell her that I'm sending you these pictures. And I thought, well, this is very dubious. So he sent me these pictures, and he said, oh, it's on the back, it's got all these labels. And you know in 2 minutes when a label is real or when a label has been fabricated and stained with tea or whatever. So yeah, so that's the one that I've come across, but otherwise, no, I haven't personally.
Interesting. I know
Yeah.
a really wonderful Florentine art restorer who lives in New York. I got to visit his studio, and he had one painting hanging on the wall. It was Madonna and Child. And after a while, I kind of asked him about it, and he said, well, this painting was actually my own lesson and big punishment in a way, because he restored the painting and he didn't see that it was a fake. So when finally an expert came and they realized this was really a good forgery, one of those really
Yeah.
incredible 19th century painters who were
Yeah.
able to do these really incredible fakes, he decided to buy the painting and kind of have it sitting in his studio to always be a reminder to how sometimes we cannot really see things clearly with our own eyes.
I
So
think you need to, yeah, if something looks too good to be true, it certainly is. And you have to sort of fight that instinct. But, there are some very dubious people out there, and there's some works that we all know of that have been painted on older canvas and aged. But I think the main thing for me is the surface of the paint. And what's very difficult to fake is the surface of the paint and what you would expect to see. So having handled 18th, 19th, 16th, 17th century canvases, you get used to the pattern of coiffure and all that, which sort of knocks quite a lot of things out to start with.
Nick, how about the artificial intelligence? Does that play any part in
I
your work?
think it certainly will in future. In fact, on the local news here, there's a chap who has developed a program, for facial recognition based on the back of other sleeper cells, and facial recognition for terrorism and border control. So I'm sure it will in future, but for the moment, not really. You can, as everybody knows, you can do a reverse image search on Google. So if you have an image of a painting or an antique, you can put it in and search back. It can be useful, perhaps more for antiques in terms of dating and authenticating things, but in terms of portraits, it doesn't really throw up anything useful. It's not really, Google isn't at the stage of being that useful, at least to me. And, nothing actually beats getting into a library. For me, I go to the Heinz Library in London, attached to the National Portrait Gallery and various other places. And there you have a whole section on a certain artist, and it's really helpful. Internet searches are obviously of use, but nothing beats actually being in the library with the books and stuff. Perhaps I'm more old school art dealer than perhaps other people take me for. I don't know. But AI, not yet. But I'm sure it will. When we've all seen the images recreated of people, and it's difficult to know in photographic terms what's real and what isn't. But in terms of search tools, I'm sure something will be coming up pretty soon. Hopefully, it won't make me obsolete. You can check in with me next year and see whether I'm still doing the same thing.
I think the human eye will never be, I really hope that, the human eye and the instincts, right, we have will always, I hope, always have the value. Which actually brings me on to ask you, do you collaborate with art experts, art historians? when you
Yes,
have questions, how open are people to collaborate or to see the works you have and give you their expertise?
very open, very open. I think in terms of public institutions now, things have changed. So I used to be able to, I won't mention any names, but I used to be able to draw on certain people in institutions for questions on authorship about early English artists. That's not possible now because they have rules in place where they can't comment on a commercial enterprise. But in terms of everybody's very free with their help and support, because there's nothing like going to the expert in that area. I'm lucky to be in Yorkshire, and I know the William Etty expert, for example. She's a few miles away. So for an artist where there are very many examples of what purports to be by their hand, it's very useful to draw on the expertise of somebody like that nearby. So I've got a few essays. William Etty's, the Victorian artist who's famous for his fleshiness and nudes. I've got a few of those. So I do often draw on experts, as I did with the Lavinia Fontana. And, you know, the generosity of spirit of academics has been totally fantastic and, you know, is always appreciated.
Yeah, yes. Nick, what happens? So, if you find something really wonderful that you love, is it ever hard to part with it?
I think if you are, well, in short, no, it's not. I'm happy to see things arrive. I'm happy to spend time with them, and I'm happy to see them go. I think that such is the nature of life. So I really don't get attached to things. The one thing that I did get, I don't know whether I mentioned, but the one thing that I did get attached to was the first painting that I purchased. I found it in Australia, in the middle of nowhere, in the Southern Highlands. It was filthy dirty. I had it cleaned. It turned out to be late 17th century allegorical work by an artist called Pierre Bercher, a Huguenot artist. And I authenticated that with the Mezzotint, which was the reverse of it. The time came to sell it. I knew the call would happen. It's an attractive painting. The gentleman arrived. He said he would buy it. And he never collected it. And I emailed him a dozen times. I called him several times. He didn't collect the painting. I tried so hard. And so I'm still living with it at home. I don't feel the laws are such that I could offer it for sale if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that. So the only thing that I would find it hard to part with, I'm actually living with every day. So it's good.
Incredible. And this was your first ever find.
Yes, yes, and not a very clever find, I have to say. It would have been better off discovering a miniature in Australia rather than a huge. It's quite a large artwork. But yeah, I live with it every day. I think I posted about it on Instagram recently, so if everyone wants to have a look, then pop and have a look there.
You know, I think it's actually quite fascinating that, in a way, kind of this was a gift of the universe, right? Starting you on this path, and then you still get to keep it. I think that's actually really a good sign. Um, and if he does come to get it, you know, I'm sure it will be difficult actually. But I love the fact that you are not holding on to them, because
I
sometimes
think,
I meet really interesting
I was gonna
artists.
I think he had an issue with collecting. I think that was the problem because he wanted to buy more than one thing. And I think he had an issue with his wife was like, you cannot buy any more paintings. So I think that was the issue which prevented him collecting it in the first place. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
No, no. I was about to say, you know, I meet many wonderful artists, contemporary artists who are really great, but who have very hard time parting with their work.
Yeah, yeah,
And
no,
that becomes a really big problem if you're an artist who, first of all, has to make a living, and you can't part with your creations,
yeah.
then it really, there is no flow, right? The energy is not moving, and you just have a house filled with works of art.
Can
So,
imagine if you're creating it, you're investing yourself in it. What
yeah.
I'm doing is I am smartening somebody up. I'm giving them a wash, not personally, but I'm giving them a wash. I'm brushing their hair. I'm making them their best self in order that they leave and go out the door and find a new partner. That's how I view it. You know, it's a Portrait Towers is an ever revolving door. People come in, people leave. You know, it's like the hotel where people check in and hopefully check out. Unlike many dealers, I'm pleased to say I don't have a room filled with painted people that have been here for decades. we'll see if that changes. But people seem to arrive and leave quite quickly, which is good.
That's amazing, really amazing.
Yeah,
And I just kind of keep thinking about, what if you were doing the same exact work even just 20 years ago, 10 or 20 years ago, how
yeah,
different the whole thing would have been actually, and how different it would be
yes,
to reach your potential clients,
yeah.
to even find new things. There was no such thing as Google search. So I'm really curious to see what will happen in the next 20 years now with artificial intelligence coming in, and how that will change the game as well. I think just really fascinating.
Yeah.
One of the questions that came in the chat was, what was your most wonderful or most important find so far? Which actually might take us to the topic of our evenings, this new sleeper that you wanted to share with us.
I can't see myself on the screen. I can just see. I need to go to a Zoom school. I can see you, which is great. I can see a few faces at the top. I can't see. Maybe I'll switch the view again.
Yes, you have to go up and go to the upper right and just click speaker, so you will see yourself actually when you speak.
Yeah, I can just see you though. It's funny. I can't see me. I can just see you. Not that I'm complaining. It's really nice to see you. I'm going to switch the view back to gallery, and then I at least can see myself in the gallery. Let's do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, most significant discovery is lurking on my desk just down here, and it's very, very small. And that is the work by Lavinia, which is, can you see it, guys?
Yes, we do. We see it.
Just in case it wasn't big enough, I've actually had it printed out on a larger scale. There you go. Look.
Oh my God. First of all, tell us how big is the original?
I think, well, it's just under. Well, I can tell you, look, the handy. I should probably have a smaller version of this. I can tell you exactly how big it is. It's just under 2 inches, basically. It's just under two
Wow.
inches. And you have to really see it to appreciate it. It's one of those things that I'm obviously being passionate about, but until you see it in person and realize the size of it and how much detail is there, then really it is staggering. Her talent is staggering. Yeah, I mean, mind blown. So that would be it. That would be my most significant discovery to date.
Wow.
Let's hope
Wow.
but for now, this is it. Yeah.
So, before we actually go into how you found it, let me just say maybe a few things about Lavinia Fontana.
Yeah.
She was born in 1552 in Bologna. Her father, Prospero, was a painter, and he actually arranged a marriage for his daughter. We have a contract that survives in which they found a nobleman from a nearby town, Imola, who was, of course, noble blood, but he didn't really have a lot of ambition or potential for earning. So they had a marriage contract drawn that said that this Pierluigi would actually come to Bologna, live with Lavinia, and allow her to paint, and in a way be really the breadwinner for the family.
Exactly.
So an incredible artist, probably considered to be the first female artist to really make a career and a living out of the court or out of a monastic community. She was really on her own. She had her own workshop. So an incredible life, an incredible talent. And there was a beautiful exhibition on Lavinia Fontana last year at the National Gallery of Ireland. So she's now kind of up in the spotlight, right? Which is, I think, really wonderful. So how did you come across this beautiful work of art?
Well, in one of those moments when you are online late at night looking at many, auctions and things, as I do, I saw a group of quite unremarkable sort of miniatures, really, 6 of them in a job lot, which is unusual to start with. Um, and then I saw this there and I thought, oh, that looks interesting, but it certainly looks old. And obviously, because of the background of it, I'm not an expert in miniatures by any means, but the background showed me that it was early. Because if we think to those English miniatures like Hilliard, and before miniatures became miniatures themselves on vellum, we're talking about illuminated manuscripts, which the portraits were taken from and became individual pieces on vellum. The backgrounds were always this color, so I thought, well, this dates it early. And then obviously looking at the costume, I thought, well, it's Italian, it's not French. And then I thought, well, who was painting around that time? And it sort of all came together in my head that it was significant. Anyway, I bought it and I was surprised that I could buy it because I just thought, there's so many people out there doing the same thing that I'm surprised I was able to even purchase it, which I did. And it turns out that the person that owned it previously was an academic and a collector whose manuscripts have been donated to a library, but his family were disposing of some of his other effects, and this was amongst them. So that's how I found it, and I was thrilled. And as we say, it's opened up a whole new world for me. I'll pop her down. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about all of this is that first of all, how small it is and what a good quality it is in. I already see a question coming in on what is the surface. So it is painted on copper, isn't it?
Yeah, it is painted on copper. So if I turn it
Yeah.
round, I'm going to show
Yeah.
you the back of it. So it's actually painted on copper.
Yeah.
And copper allowed things to be more portable. It's more, rigid in a sense, obviously, than vellum, and it enables you to give more detail. Specifically, the artist can give more detail to areas such as the lace and stuff. So in that respect, but it's an early example of a miniature on copper, isn't it? For example, this one obviously is late 17th century, which is when things really took off in that respect. But this is a very early example. And what's fascinating, you touched on it about her being the first female recorded artist. Aoife Brady, who's the expert in Dublin, who curated the exhibition that you mentioned, it was fascinating to see the artist's work when she started working with her father, who's a mannerist painter, and then developing on her own. And she even connected the fact that, for example, she may be painting a miniature like this when she was pregnant, because they correlated things with her diaries. And then when she wasn't pregnant, she would be painting a larger piece in her studio. So the artist's internal life and how it relates to the work, I found completely fascinating as well. And Eva was so generous in guiding me through the whole exhibition. It was really thrilling. That was the highlight of the journey so far. Really, it was fantastic.
Yes, and she has 11 children in a period of about 17 years, which meant that she really had to be very strategic about the commissions that are coming in and that she can accept. But these miniatures probably would be something so easy and quick that she could do and people could afford them. So it was really probably so many uses for these really lovely objects. And I love how you're actually wearing one of the miniatures, basically showing us also how they could be worn or maybe even kept in a pocket. What do you have around your neck now? What is that work of art?
Basically, it's a late 17th century continental one, and I just love it basically because I'm going to switch the view again. Sorry,
I
guys.
see it. I see it now.
It's a gallery, so you can actually see it. Maybe I'm going to come forward and bring him like that. Can you see him? I
Yes.
just love his costume. Costume's always really important to me. I always have highly decorative works for sale, and I love his banyan. That's what really attracted me to him. But you're right, it's really not the 17th century, this period. It was the 18th century, wasn't it, when people would wear miniatures as rings, as pendants, as part of bracelets and stuff. And fascinating as well that miniatures, unlike portraits I mentioned before that were there to record somebody for posterity, miniatures could be about a specific moment, whether it was a marriage or something like that, or a certain event in someone's life, which means that you have things like those John Smart miniatures where you have people with pink hair wearing really outlandish costumes that you don't sometimes get in actual portraits because it's for a specific moment when they want to look their most fashionable, their hottest or whatever. So in that sense, miniatures do their intimacy, obviously, the fact that you can wear them close to you like Elizabeth's doing today and like I'm doing, it just brings everything, doesn't it, closer to home, more emotional experience. And it's nice to be able to have wearable art, isn't it?
And that meant also you can have your dear ones close to you, right? Like we keep maybe the loved ones on our phone now, but it used to be in our wallet, right? So that was also an easy way to actually have someone dear to you always there, with you. But what I wanted to say about this one, if you can show us again that blown up version, it is really interesting to see the details, just how skillful she is as an artist.
It is fascinating because obviously now everybody wants to attribute everything to Lavinia Fontana, but and you'll see things now at even provincial auction houses saying School of Lavinia Fontana attributed to, but it's only when you see something that's so small with so much detail, you think, how many people could have actually done that? And she is one of very few. I'm just going to bring it right in so you can see all the detail of the rough, and the fact that the clothing of the period, it looks so space age, doesn't it? Almost the collar looks so Star Trekky in a way. But Lavinia was one of the first really to feature, wasn't she? You know, the fashion and the jewelry specifically. Jewelry is very, very important because of her position, and the textiles because of her position in Bologna and the society of the day, wasn't it?
Yes, and I know that Eva was telling us when she came to Studiolo about the fact that many contracts of the time actually show that she would sometimes borrow the beautiful jewels from her
Yeah.
sitters, take them to her studio, and then have time to really paint every detail. So one of the great questions Elizabeth put in was, what is that flower above her head or above her ear?
Yeah, it's a specific hair decoration. I don't know what the name of it is, but it's a trembling sort of like gold thing with pearls, and they often wore them at the time. It's very specific, and that's one of the things that made me date it to that period. And actually, to mention another art dealer, Philip Mould, he wrote a book about sleepers a long time ago. On the cover of that book, actually, is a Fontana thing, and I think she's got very similar thing in her hair. And funnily enough, when it came to conservation, we were very lucky that the majority of this was perfect. There was just a small amount missing from the top, and I became obsessed about it. So the chap that restored it, who is fantastic, I sent it to him, not again, but I made him revise the very tip of it because it needed to have the curve that they have. So well spotted, Elizabeth. I expect you to be wearing one of those soon. I'm sure we can find you one.
And you know, sometimes on these pieces that are actually made of metal,
Yeah,
you can even find and you can tell the story of their existence in a way. If they have maybe little holes, it
yeah.
means that they would have been maybe hanged on a maybe on a necklace to be worn, or if they have little places where maybe the nails would have been, so it was displayed maybe in someone's cabinet of curiosities. They really do tell a lot, even they're so tiny. They actually speak volumes.
That was a fascinating thing, I think, as well about the exhibition, wasn't it? It was um, the other elements that were involved in the exhibition. So the textiles, the jewelry, and how what is the animal that was a symbol of fertility? Now I want to say a stoat or a weasel or something, but all these women were wearing like that very famous painting. They had the animal hanging around them, didn't they? Which seems bizarre, but made out of gold. It was certainly a bonkers time in terms of fashion and fertility, wasn't it? Really, is it a stoat or what would you call it? Was it a stoat or a weasel or something?
Yeah, they're kind of a little, yes, definitely an animal with like feet and stuff like yes. And they actually would, and I think in the exhibition they even had one of the examples of this metal work that would be kind of accessories that these women would have worn at the time. Um, and looking also at your beautiful sitter there, maybe this was the time when she was getting married. And you know, they were even in the Bologna society, these sumptuary laws that would very clearly tell women how many of the work or the beautiful jewels they can wear on them. So
Yes.
for the first year of their marriage, maybe they could display five different things. 3 years later, it would go down to three. So it would really be very strictly, how can I say it, almost like organized exactly. So they wouldn't be able to do a lot. So the woman that you have is quite modest. She has a necklace, she has a small thing in her hair, and then she also has something in the back of her hair. And I wonder if that earpiece is actually connected all the way to the back of her hair.
Yeah, it could be potentially, couldn't it? And what's fascinating is also, I think everybody's probably aware of that large portrait in, well, not necessarily, but if you look into it, and if you look into Lavinia Fontana, what will come up quite quickly is the large portrait, which is in Dublin. And I think the Gallery of Ireland purchased it in the 19th century. Was it in the Louvre, and there was a fire, and then it came up for auction. They purchased it. Anyway, it's much, much, much large scale of work, life size almost, of Queen of Sheba. But basically, there are lots of characters like this dressed in exactly the same way. And an Italian academic that I was working with even went as far as to suggest that perhaps this lady could have been one of the people in the crowd and drew parallels. I'm not sure myself, but certainly in terms of the fashion and the jewelry, they look very, very similar.
True, true. Lavinia Fontana is so fascinating. Out of the 11 children, she has only 3 survived adulthood, and the 3 boys actually even took her last name, De Fontana, and they added that on to their father's last name too. So I think it's really interesting how she was such a respected member of her society. And you kind of wonder, because she was so prolific, you kind of wonder how many of these sleepers are out there.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. And in terms of miniatures specifically, I mean, the Met has a larger, more circular miniature, which I've seen. I think it was in the exhibition actually. And I've seen another this size come up for auction about 15 years ago, and actually it was suggested it could be a pair to this. Um, there's a whole industry out there, and I'm not part of that. But as we know, in terms of Italian art of the period, there are people in Naples, living in Naples, working in Naples, going through diaries, going through archives, trying to find paintings by Artemisia. And the same thing is happening with Lavinia. There's a whole industry around it, isn't there, to reattribute paintings. That's why I'm thrilled that I went to see Aoife in Dublin, because as I intimated before about searching for sleepers, I love now to be able to deal with facts, as you were saying about her place in society. I was saying about her relationship to painting at certain periods in her life. Aoife Brady could practically tell you what Lavinia Fontana was having for breakfast. I love all those specifics. So when somebody says attributed to Lavinia Fontana or suggests it could be, that's fine, but show me the facts. And the facts are there because people are looking into the facts on a daily basis, like you've said about the marriage contract. That's what I find fascinating. Real details about real people that bring these sleeping works of art to life, you know?
Yes, yes, truly, truly incredible. What do you think will happen to it, Nick? What are your hopes for this lovely young lady?
Um, Hmm. Well, I've got a couple of meetings next week in a couple of places. I'll say that much. But it's interesting in that people that you think may be enthusiastic about it aren't as enthusiastic as you would expect, and then other people are. And a couple of institutions have been very interested and very straightforward and warm in their communication. So I have a couple of meetings next week, and I'll be taking her down potentially in Elizabeth's case there to display her in something fitting really, because it actually locks, so it's high security miniature display. Yeah, so plans are to go to an institution, or potentially there are private individuals that are interested in purchasing and then donating to an institution. So it'd be nice for people to be able to see it up close, like I've shown you today, because nothing, I don't think it should sit in somebody's cabinet of curiosities. It's too good for that. It's nice for people to be able to, actually experience it in person. Would you agree, Paola?
Yes, I agree, definitely. And I think if you have it in a museum, of course, it will be available to so many than just someone holding it in their own home. But I do have to address the box that Elizabeth gave you as a gift. It's actually not an accident you're using that box to display it, because this is exactly how these small objects, these miniatures, or even Renaissance portrait medals would have been displayed. You would have so many of them around, and you wanted to be able to really arrange them in your own studiolo,
Yes.
and really show off their beauty or also how small they are. So interesting that you have this beautiful object to actually then carry it in as well. So that also kind of continues the story of this beautiful work of art too.
Well, I'll just say that good things find each other, really. And Elizabeth's a great friend, and she must have known in some way that this would come in handy. And it's just the perfect thing at the perfect time. That's
Yes,
it.
yes, very true. I see there some other comments here in the chat. Let's see. Hold on. Do you see the chat, Nick? Do you see the questions coming in?
I'm pleased to say I don't, but maybe you can relate. I can't see.
Yes, let's see. A quick search, Google search says that rabbit or hare represents fertility. Yes, Nabil, this might be good, but I think the ones that the Lavinia particularly used are a little bit of a kind of a mixture of different kind of animals, actually. It wasn't a rabbit.
It's a pine marten. It's a pine marten.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
like a weaselly, a stoaty, four-legged, long creature about this big with a really cute face but very sharp teeth. And I would get my reference book out, but the whole setup would collapse, so we don't want to do that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pine marten. So maybe don't adopt one as a pet, but maybe do Google one later.
Or if you need it for, for special magic purposes, you can get yourself one of them.
That's a whole new business, Paola. Far too busy to be hiring out pine martens. Well, we'll
Hey,
see.
you just never know if artificial intelligence takes over and you're now all of a sudden out of your deals.
I'll be breeding pine martens. Yes.
Oh gosh, I love it. Um, Nick, I wonder, what are you, let's say, do you have any big dreams in the cupboard? Like, what do you think? Where do you, first of all, see your career going? And I think you live in a very exciting field. You really are doing something that I think brings you a lot of pleasure and excitement, and I think also puts you in touch with really fascinating art collectors, people who appreciate the things you have.
Yeah, I don't know what direction it'll go in. The direction I hope it will go in for me is that I have less works of art. So I have quite a large inventory of many portraits, many works on paper. What I would love to do is basically distill everything, have less, have less works of art, have really meaningful things, work more with museums, go more down the academic side of things. Having said that, it's quite a solitary life as it is, because obviously, if I'm predominantly online, the work that I do is predominantly online, which is why it's nice to meet all of you virtually this evening, because I can sell a painting, box it up, send it off to America, to wherever. I never actually get to meet the clients. So, yes, I would love to be more focused, more distilled, more academic, but I don't want to remove myself from the world. So I don't know. Let's see. Let's see. The paintings themselves dictate things, don't they? Like, this will be a significant discovery if the institution I think would like it takes it. That will be a boost to me and to my profile potentially, which might bring other things. Who knows? All I know at the moment is I'm very happy. Every day is different. I get up enthused about the job that I do, searching for sleepers. And as you intimated before, every day is different. And if you can wake up, enthused about life, um, you can't ask for more really at this point. Still doesn't feel like work.
Yes, that is the best part. And also love how you on the period portraits, your wonderful Instagram profile. I love how you actually wait to have a camera on you to then open a work of art once it arrives to you, which I think is so exciting because we are part of that discovery with you. So I think it's actually brilliant the way you bring it to everyone who is interested in what you do. I think it's actually really, really awesome.
Yeah, it's really good fun, but also, you've got to think about the next thing. So I posted the other day with these paintings in plastic, and people are like, what's in the thing? People, and then you have a certain formula of doing things. Someone does the same formula. I do these videos every week and I talk, somebody's doing the same thing, someone else is. You've got to keep everything fresh. So that's the only slight pressure, which is you've got to keep coming up with ideas. But everybody's a different personality. There's room for everybody, and that's what's great about the art world. People are happy to share knowledge, experience. Everybody's got their own areas. There's space for everybody. So I always try to be quite transparent and share things, share the discoveries, share the opening of the boxes, because that's it. There's no point hiding everything away. It's to be shared, isn't it? And that's
Yeah.
the joy of the internet, really. I can share it and why we're having this conversation tonight, in a sense. It's good.
Exactly. One of the questions that came in now is one of my favorite artists is Rosalba Carriera, who also painted miniatures and had her own very successful studio. So Rosalba
Yeah.
is a little bit later. She's Rococo. But would she have been aware of Lavinia, perhaps inspired by her?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I can't answer that question, and I'm not the right person to answer that question. So the answer to that question is I don't know, potentially. But Rosalba is fascinating in terms of miniatures because Rosalba was the first person that was painting on the interior of boxes, objects of virtue. And then she realized actually that working on ivory, if it was prepared in a certain way, could give better skin tones and all those things. So she was the first person that pioneered, wasn't she, works on ivory. And then that took off the 18th century. Everybody in England, when miniatures were at their height, as we said, being worn as bracelets, whatever, all on ivory. I'm quite enthusiastic about Rosalba because I've purchased another portrait miniature recently, which has all the sort of feelings of being potentially by her in terms of the color palette, the fashion, the style, the shape, the background of the miniature. I can't say more, but what I can say is if it turns out to be by her, then obviously I can come back and chat to you about that. So that's another person that I would love to, that's probably the next person that I will be, gelling up on and getting into.
You know what's interesting, Nick, about Rosalba? You're talking about how your paintings are traveling more than you do. I think it's actually in Victoria and Albert Museum they discovered that the paintings they had by Rosalba when they started restoring them and opening up, they're always done on pastel, right? So they have this surface behind them. They realized that Rosalba would usually put a small icon of three kings, like a
Yeah.
three magi, which I think is such a beautiful thing because of course they are traveling, right? So they were meant to protect her works while they were on their long journey from Venice, perhaps going to London or somewhere else, across the world. So I think really fascinating. One thing I wanted to say, I cannot believe that our time is almost up, Nico. There is so much to talk about. But one thing I wanted to say, I was thinking about the art dealers and how the world has changed. So I do have a lovely movie. I don't know if you know about it, but it's called it's actually a Finnish movie. It came out in 2018, and it's called One Last Deal.
No,
Have you seen it by chance?
I haven't. I haven't seen it. The only one that I've seen that I'd recommend to you, and I can't remember the final offer or something, which is,
Okay.
have you seen that one? Which is, I think, is Italian, and that's about a guy in a room of portraits, and resonates too much to me. But no, I'll have to look at it. Is it good?
Yes, it's actually really good. I'll put it here in the chat for everyone if you want to see it. I ended up seeing it in an art festival in Australia of all places, and it's about this Finnish man who is basically looking for this one last deal because he has to retire. His family has no interest to get involved in the business, and it kind of shows, he's very much an old school guy who has Rolodex with numbers of his
Yeah.
clients, and it really a moving story of someone whose prime is long gone, and a new time has come in, and he's no longer able to kind of sustain this, but it does have a happy ending. So let me see if I can put it here in the chat. So called One Last Deal, and it is 2018. So it is subtitled unless you speak Finnish,
Yeah.
but definitely worth sitting through it.
I'll have a look. That sounds good. Oh, right. Okay. It's there. Perfect.
One Last Deal. Nick, I wanted to say that you are very welcome to come to Studiolo and unveil any other sleepers as you go on. I have a feeling you will find many of them on your wonderful journey. And I do have one Studiolo tradition that I started last season is where my guest actually proposes a question for
Yes.
the next guest coming in. So my next guest will be my professor from Syracuse University. He's a historian, Dennis Romano. He's an expert on Venice.
Yeah.
And his new book is 800-page book on the history of Venice, probably the most comprehensive history of Venice up to date now. So would you have a question or two for him?
I will have a question or two, but what I feel like is people might unmute themselves and start to answer the question, so you're not allowed to do that. Yeah, can you imagine? I could pose a couple of questions. The first one being, what is the oldest building in Venice, the oldest recorded building in Venice? And the second one being, why are gondolas in Venice painted black? Those are my two questions. Nobody can unmute. You just have to leave it hanging in there till
Okay.
this chap arrives, basically. When is it? Because I'm going to be watching. Is it next week? How often do
It's
these
going to be
things?
next week. So the Studiolos are not every Saturday. I do have Next week is the Professor Dennis Romano. And then I have on the 17th of February, actually, my next guest comes in, and he will talk about diplomacy and the use of food in diplomacy by Venetian diplomats in Istanbul. So that will be a fun one as well. So I hope we will see you, Nick. I hope we will see you in the audience. A lot to discover. And one of the questions coming in said, I think the lampshade could be a sleeper. Let me see. Let's see your lampshade.
I can see myself. I've gone to see. Let's look. I'm putting myself in the
The
gallery.
one behind you on your right.
Yeah, basically, if I sold lampshades, I would be a very, very, very wealthy man because everybody's very excited about these lampshades. It basically is, it's a print from the 1960s or 70s by a designer called Tibor Reich, and it's called A Tournament. I found a lampshade, actually, Elizabeth, it's from the shop we went to together, is where I bought the lampshade. I'm pointing at this side of the screen. I don't know whether you could see me doing that. It's from a shop on Goldbond Road near Portobello Road. I had it copied. There's another one next to my desk. If anybody wants to buy a lampshade, drop me a message. I'll get bored of these eventually, and I can send them off. But yeah, that's what it is. Tibor Reich.
Beautiful. Elizabeth, thank you so much for introducing me to Nick and now allowing us actually all to get a glimpse of his fascinating world. So I'm really, really grateful. And Nick, thank you so much for coming to the Studiolo. Because I think a wonderful way to kick off the spring season of our talks. And I wish you really the best of luck. And I always look forward to see what you post on next on Instagram. So I will keep track of all your adventures as we go on.
Show me around. You need to show me around Florence and not just the Gucci Museum, which is probably the low spot. I don't know. It was fun, but I'm sure there are. Well, I know there's much more to explore there. Thank you, guys. Lovely to see you all. I've never met most of you before. Thank you so much for tuning in and for spying in on what I'm up to. I might be back. Who knows?
Yes, we will
Aloha.
love you. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And I will see you all next week with the history of Venice and Professor Dennis Romano. Grazie.